This is the original kerning, the way it's supposed to look in the heavy. Now, the kerning is retained in the lighter weight, but as you can see, well, it doesn't look right. You see this T and the, could tuck into the O a little bit more. The L and the T look too far apart. The A and the T looks too far apart. The reason for the T and the O looking so strange is, see, this is really thin, so it can tuck into the O. Whereas before, this was kind of a big flat shape, so it didn't need any kerning at all. It just ended up where it's supposed to end up. So it means go through all the kerning again and fix it all. So I'm going to go through everything and make sure it looks good in the light. Now, if you do that, the medium weight is going to be right on. I've never had a problem with that. Like, you basically, as long as the heavy one has good kerning, the light one has good kerning, the medium one should be right in the right spot. Yeah. Now I'm looking at the medium weight thinking, well, there's some problems here. Look at this W, looks too light. This S, you know, I still had to do that compromise with the heavy, but it's just not working right. So I have to decide, am I going to make manual changes to the medium weights? Or am I going to just ignore it? Or am I going to compromise the heavy? So I need to make some decisions here, what I'm going to do. Should I make the W heavy in the heavier weight? Now, since I'm going to throw away the lightest weight, I can mess around with that stuff. I can start adding a little bit more, because I had this kind of 20 unit thickness rule. But I can add a little bit more to that to try to affect the middle weight. So this is where I'm going through and trying to attack some of the problems. I'm trying to solve them using the interpolation. The last resort is going in and doing manual changes. And if that's the case, I just have to make a note, fix the E, fix the bar on the E, and then go back and do it. But I hope I don't have to. And here I'm trying to deal with I'm previewing the medium A, and I'm trying to figure out what can I do to make this work? How can I make this compromise? Okay, well, it's time to start decomposing things in the master. So now that I have this interpolated and it's all working fine, there's no need to keep it as a composite anymore. Why not decompose it? That way I don't have to decompose it for every weight that I export. So I'm going to decompose that. Make that, so that's going to turn into real geometry. The grader, I was using a flipped version. I want to make sure this, when I use it for the greater less than, that I'm using a real version of the real geometry, so I got to replace that. It's hard to explain. When you get there, it'll make sense. A little bit of surgery here and there. Here, the J, I forgot to drop it down. I'm going to start welding this stuff. Anything you can do welding jobs on before you do the final export will save you some time. You know, you only have to do it twice, the heavyweight and the lightweight. Why do it a whole bunch of times? But you can't just remove overlaps sometimes, because it'll create more geometry and it won't interpolate properly. Here's an example where if I weld this, it's not going to interpolate properly. But what I can do is I can drag this point and shove it inside the body of the bottom of the U, so it doesn't have a little weird gap. See, if I left it here, there'd be a little weird gap that I have to fix on every weight that I export. So that saves a little bit of time just moving that point, just decomposing, moving that point around. Now I'm going to set my default weights. Okay? These are, I'm basically figuring out what's extra light, what's regular, which ended up being 600, what's bold and what's heavy. And by that, I'm using graph paper, I'm planning, I'm, just moving things around, trying to figure out what feels like regular, what feels like bold. There's no real science to it. Some people have tried to make a formula, but I really think you just have to look at it and then figure out on graph paper how to make it smooth. It's rarely ever linear. Usually there's kind of a curve to it, like the difference between the bold and the heavy could be like 300 between, whereas the difference between extra light and light, they might be really close together. Okay, so now I'm generating instances. So I'm going to generate my heavy, generate all my instances. Here we go. Now and I'm saving them as, see, this font was called Clonar while I was working on it. I just had to come up with something. You can see bold, extra light, light, regular. Now, when I'm doing the italics in this version, normally I will do an italics master and export the italics separately. In this case, I'm just doing an oblique, so I'm totally skipping that because I think you can figure out how to make an oblique. It basically, you're just slanting everything and then offsetting it to the left a certain amount. There's more to italics than that, but for the sake of this tutorial, I didn't want to make it an extra hour long by adding italics. Italics can be really hard and it can double the length of your project. And here we have a test of the ultralight. This is the, you know, see there's some thick and thin going on. I made a little bit of adjustment to this because I found it looked better if it matched here. So I made some small adjustments and made some notes what adjustments need to be made. And I'm going to start doing surgery on this blue stuff. So I selected all the blue characters, all the blue glyphs, and I'm going to decompose. Here we go. There's no turning back. And I'm deleting all this red junk because I don't need it anymore. It's all been used elsewhere. So I'm going to delete these glyphs. And now remember this thing. So I have to select the middle of this and cut, remove overlap, and paste. And now on the boulder weights, this is not going to cut through. Same goes with the currency symbol. That's the little Sputnik, right? So I'm going to cut this, remove overlap, paste. And some little optical adjustments here and there. I find this, it's kind of like the X. There's kind of a optical illusion that happens here, so I'm kind of playing around with this to try to get rid of that. Okay, now I'm taking all the open fonts and removing overlap. That's going to get rid of the little twists on the W, the N, the M, the A. Remember it had those little twists? That's going to get rid of all that. It's just going to make sure there's no overlapping anything left anymore. It's going to do some quick, what is it called? Hinting. Auto hinting. Actually, no, it's just going to remove hinting in case there was any. Now I'm going to set up my hinting setting. This is really simple. I've got a zone here, I've got a zone here, and I've got a zone there for my overshoots. This is a very square font, so I don't even have any secondary zones. Very simple. And my stem widths, I'm measuring the L. I'm taking the L, I'm measuring this, and I'm measuring that. I don't use the auto thing because it's useless. That's needed for figuring out, it has to do with hinting, obviously, but it's hard to explain. Okay, what's going on here? I'm doing auto hinting. All right, so that's my OTF, my not true type hinting, my postscript hinting, making sure that's all working. And make sure you manually generate kerning for each font. In the options, there's something that will automatically update the kerning when it's out of date. Never trust that thing. Never trust it. I've had fonts ship that didn't have updated kerning, and I was very upset to see something up on my fonts or whatever, and it was like, the hinting is broken, send an update. Oh yeah, do not rely on that. You want to generate your own, because sometimes it works, but I find in this very specific instance of generating a bunch of instances and then generating the fonts, that's when it's going to forget conveniently to update the kerning. Oh, I've been burned many times. And here's our test font. That's how the medium looks. So, and I came up with a name in about 3 minutes using a online Scrabble dictionary. Make sure I had it all, because I wanted to show off the T and the X. And then for the naming, okay, naming is tricky because there's this automatic build names button, which is kind of useless. You make the name here, you put a 2-letter code for the weight, you set the weight, you set the width, usually normal, unless you're doing different widths. Style name has to be either regular, italic, bold, or bold italic. So regular for everything except bold and bold italic and italic. And then you hit build names. It's going to make everything wrong. So you copy this one, paste it here, and remove the hyphen. And then on the next page, you just have the plain name here, and then you have the style name here. This is how you have to do it. And then you have to make sure you have this format. So you can hit auto, but you got to put your version number, semicolon, your 4-letter Foundry name, okay? And then you have to hit fill in here. That's how you have to do it. The auto buttons generally will mess you up. So you have to do it that way. Then when you go to your panos thing, you're going to make sure these are set. You should do a little research to find out how these work. And definitely make sure your weight is set. The other settings don't matter as much, but weight has to be proper, otherwise it won't show up in certain application menus in the right order. And don't forget with bold, bold is regular, bold. Bold is not bold up here. So you have to put regular and bold, and make sure you check mark this bold thing. And same with bold italic. And that's the format here. Now, I like to auto-hint so I don't export hinting from FontLab. I find their auto-hinting to be pretty much useless. So I use TTF auto-hint, which is free. You can send a donation, and I'd recommend that you do. This is the batch file that I use. Good old DOS batch file that will automatically, so I make this little thing each time, and I execute that, and it just spits out beautifully hinted fonts. I find these settings work almost all the time. There are a few fonts where I had to modify that, but most of the time that just makes a nicely hinted TTF. And here is the result. If you're using Mac, you're going to have a lot better tools to work with, at least a better choice of tools to work with. You're going to have glyphs, you're going to have RoboFont, all kinds of stuff. With Windows in 2017, you pretty much have to use FontLab. There are other tools which are fine if you're just doing a single font weight or just a bold, italic, regular, italic. But if you're doing a large family, you pretty much have to use FontLab right now. Which I'm sorry I complain about it so much. I've been using it since the year 2000, and it's been decades. It's been over a decade since we've had any kind of significant update. And a lot of the bugs have been around for over a decade. So it'll still be a couple of years before there will be a new version, probably in Windows. Probably 2019, I'm hoping. And that's about it. You know, don't rush through, and do spend a lot of time working on those relationships right at the beginning. That's the most important part, and that's the kind of thing that, you know, I think because I do a lot of free fonts, a lot of people come to me and ask me about this stuff, especially beginners. And that's the thing I see the most is problem number one, trying to draw the whole font in one shot. Problem number two, trying to make too ambitious a project right at the beginning. When I started making fonts, I was doing stuff like band logos, you know, like the AC/DC font and stuff like that. And it was a really good way to learn. I see a lot of people that want to create their magnum opus, this text font that covers every language that it was ever written and has all these different weights and open type features and stuff like that. It's like, you slow down, do a all caps display font, make a bunch of really easy ones just to get used to the tools and just so you can make some mistakes at the beginning, because no matter what, when you look back at the first fonts you made, they're going to look terrible. So you want to make sure you do kind of silly, easier projects at the beginning and then work your way towards, you know, your magnum opus, whatever it is, which I still haven't done. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Please hit the like thumb. Don't hit subscribe because I'm not going to do any more of these, I don't think. But thanks very much, and visit typodermicfonts.com for all your font needs.